back to Sprague River Homestead on another 4-H Friday. Today, we're going to be talking about meat pen judging. So of all the meat pens that you see at fair, typically the pen of 3 is the one that most people go with. I assume the reasoning for this is usually because in the minds of most people, they make better money off of it. It is considered to be the toughest of the meat pens is to do the pen of 3. And we're going to go over how that's judged and explain why that is. Now, we're doing the meat pen judging video before we do the breed selection video so that you can keep these things in mind as we go and we talk about breeds. A lot of kids, for whatever reason, get to fair and don't understand how their pens are actually being judged. And what they find out that they are woefully unprepared for this. So let's go through this. Now, most of this, most fairs are being judged to the ARBA standards, right? We've talked about this in another video where the big difference at your fair is most likely the weights. A lot of fairs are doing something different in both age and weight than what ARBA does, so we won't cover that part of things. But we will cover these 4 areas and what that means. Okay, so I don't paraphrase this and mess this up or leave any room for confusion. I'm going to actually read some of this right from the ARBA standard itself. So when we're talking about meat type, and guys, this is a huge deal. Meat type is most desirable to be commercial type. We'll do a type video coming up so that makes more sense. But your true meat breeds, your Satins, your New Zealands, your Californians are what's called a commercial type. These are big rabbits. They have a very particular body style. The body should be heavily muscled, well-rounded, back legs thickly muscled, and extend far down the leg towards the hock joint. The loin should be wide and thick starting from the rib cage, carrying to the hip loin juncture. Rib cage should be deep, well sprung, wide chest that will give it room to properly house those heart and lungs, all of which are vital for the animal growth. Front legs should also be considered in evaluating animals and should carry enough muscle to balance and correctly support your animal. Hindquarters are most important, loin second, forequarters are third in importance. So we will do a video coming up when the weather is better and I can actually get some animals out and on a table and handle them and kind of explain what some of these terminologies mean. But basically what you're looking for is that commercial type. So they're going to come out, they're going to go up, and they're going to slope back down. You want to avoid stuff that's got the long shoulder. So I breed Americans. Americans, for the purpose of meat pen judging, are not a good choice. They can have a very meaty back end, but that longer shoulder will actually bump them down the list in competition compared to some of their other animals. So keep that in mind. We're looking for that commercial type. This also means that you're avoiding stuff that's got a very compact type, which again, we'll do a video so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about here. But mostly those compact animals just don't have the big thick loin and the big body depth and those big rear ends and big legs that we want to see. So it's also worth noting during that meat pen type that they are looking for an animal that is not heavy boned. Again, we'll talk about this in breed selection, but you want to stay away from stuff or crosses that have things like Flemish Giant, French Lops, English Lops, anything with that really big bone. That actually is not what they're looking for in meat type. Part of that is that those animals will actually put all their resources into growing that meat or that bone frame first and meat second. And remember, meat pen judging is all about what? It is about the meat. All right, so the next thing we're looking at, 30 points, is going to be flesh condition. And remember, this is all 3 animals in your meat pen are going to look like this. You've got to have the consistency here, which we'll talk about in a second. Your flesh condition is not only flesh condition, it's overall body condition. So this is where we don't want to see skinny animals. We don't want to see really fat animals, which is actually pretty hard to do in meat pens because they're just not that old. But we want to see really good condition all the way around. We want good muscling. We want tight, firm muscling. We want to see that those animals are clean. This is also where we're judging you, the exhibitor, on how those animals look. Is the fur dirty? Do we have stains? That kind of stuff. That reflects on poor husbandry and poor rabbit keeping. So this is all kind of the same thing in that flesh condition. Condition here actually reads, all fryers in a pen must be in prime condition. This reflects the care and management practice of the breeder, or in our case, the exhibitor, since most 4-H kids are not actually breeding them anymore. Fryers must be solid. They must not show any signs of flabbiness, softness, looseness, or pottiness. The pelt should be tight over the body, and animals must be clean and show no sign of neglect or disease. So, hugely important, right? Important only second to our meat type. So this is huge. How those animals show is vital. All right, now I'm going to skip over uniformity real quick, because uniformity to me is actually the most important. So we'll talk about that in a minute. 10 points goes to your fur. Now remember, juniors have an immature coat, so you don't really expect great coats out of your meat pens. But the big thing here is that it should conform to the breed description in the standard and be uniform for all 3 animals in the pen. So what they're basically saying there is, if it looks like a New Zealand or a cow or whatever, it needs to conform to the same fur standard, whether that's rollback or in most cases a flyback fur. Again, I'll do a video talking about those fur types at a later date. But it's important more than anything to know that all 3 animals should have the same thing. They should have the same type of fur. They should have the same length of fur. And going back to uniformity here in a second, really we should see all 3 animals with the same color. Okay, so uniformity. Let's go back to this 20-pointer, because this is where most kids fail. This separates here from the bottom of the classes to the ones that take home those champion and grand champion ribbons and reserve champion, whatever your fair has. This is usually the thing that gets everybody, is just uniformity. For some reason, we have started seeing a lot of meat pens where you'll have 1 or 2 animals that are huge, biggest, and then you'll have a third that could be as much as half a pound to a pound off of what the others are. This is also where we run into stuff like seeing wild colors, like you'll have 2 broken blacks and a solid red or something goofy. And guys, the whole point of the meat pen, and this is part of what makes it really difficult, is consistency. Remember, you're being judged on being a producer, and what does production want? It's uniformity. Every animal that you pull out should be roughly the same size, color, shape, fur, the whole 9 yards. So this meat pen is an example of what you're producing in your herd. Unfortunately, because so many kids aren't breeding their own meat pens anymore, some of that I think is getting lost a little bit in translation, so to speak, because you're buying them at a relatively young age, right? 5 and 6 weeks in a lot of cases, so that uniformity can be really tough. But here's what uniformity means when we're talking about our meat pens. So uniformity reflects the ability of the exhibitor to select 3 fryers or roasters, depending on what your class is, for the pen that have similar traits. Uniformity must be present in weight, size, appearance, condition, meat type, and fur, and all should be as similar in all respects as possible. So the rule of thumb that I have always heard from judges is they literally want those animals within a couple of ounces of each other. And I know that sounds really tough, but really in a good litter, you're going to see that. At a later date, I'm going to do a video once I've got some rabbits on the ground, because right now it's cold. I'll do a video showing you how to go through a pen of, 10 babies or 8 babies or whatever we end up with, and pick out those animals that are uniform. Because like I said, this is the thing that really separates the bottom placers from your champions. How consistent can you get with those animals? Okay, guys, so that is how you judge a pen of 3. Now, if you're doing single fryers, single roasters, it's still close to the same thing. The difference is we take off this uniformity. We add 10 points to meat type and 10 points to this flesh and overall condition. So we still have 100 points to shoot for. First stays the same no matter what you're doing. But this is kind of the breakdown. So this is what I want you to be keeping in mind before we do the video next week, talking about the best breeds to be using for these meat pens. All right, so if you have questions, leave them down in the comments. We will be doing these 4-H Fridays again pretty much every week. I took some time off at the holidays. We were under a lot of snow, so it makes it a little bit tough to get out and do some shooting. If you have things you want to see in particular, make sure to leave them down below. That way, if I don't have it on my list to shoot, I will get it on my list. I know that a lot of people are starting to think about 4-H because a lot of those rabbit groups are just now starting to meet. I know a lot of clubs aren't even buying their animals yet. Most fairs are happening in June, July, August, that kind of stuff. So we have some time, but be thinking about this as we go forth and start picking out breeds and then moving on through the meat pen type projects. All right, so that's it. Happy homesteading. See you next Friday.